Hey 1010, it's Dan, and thank you for joining us today as we look backward on some of the questions that we didn't get to in April's question and response night. With me is my amazing bride, Khalid, Jim Fettner, Gina Vaughn, and Joe Zidron, and we're going to try and hit as many questions in as little time as possible. We'll see what happens. We're going to dive straight in. The first question that I've got is, why should I trust the Bible? I guess some of that could be, why do you trust the Bible even? Rather than this big case for Christ response where I laid out, why do you trust the Bible?
Well, I think one of the things that's unique about the Bible that isn't like any other book is there's actually prophecy. And prophecy is unique in the Bible to any other book, that it's predicted prophecy that's been fulfilled. And so that kind of validates a lot of the words of it. And then, you can go dive into the historical aspects of, we have more copies of the Bible than we have of Homer, than we have of Iliad, than we have of other things. So historically, as far as a document, it's recognized. So it's a legitimate historical document, but then it has the power of the prophecy that backs it. And then if you just experience it in your life, it's the Word of God. It's spirit. It's life. It's sharper than any two-edged sword. Just pick it up and watch the power that's in it, Yeah,
and for me also, it's how did Jesus Christ interact with the scriptures of the Bible he had available to him at his time, right? And the Bible of the New Testament is replete with his ministry focusing on the scriptures. What did he do? He read the scriptures. When he was 12 years old in Luke, he was saying, hey, look at how advanced he is in his knowledge of the scriptures. So Jesus in his life and ministry clearly took the Bible as authoritative, and sought to bring his life underneath the teachings of the Bible that he understood it. He ultimately became the fulfillment of those scriptures. So a big clue to me is, in terms of reliability of the Bible, is how did the resurrected Christ interact with it?
I think one of the things that has always made me, over the last 11 years, once I started seeing it, is the fact that if I were, seeing as I was raised in a religion that was created, if I were to create my own religion, there's a lot of stuff that I would remove from the Bible. Like there's a lot of stuff in there that would be really convenient for us as believers trying to share our faith if it wasn't in there. Which leads me to lean into its trustworthiness in terms of it being an enduring, like this enduring Word of God, because that is so precious that you don't take stuff out. And I think that from the Old Testament through the New, throughout all of Scripture, there's stuff in there I'm like, if they do a biography of my life, I hope they don't include that. And they include so much of it. And I think sometimes what can end up happening, and we may talk about it later, what can end up happening is I can read some of this stuff that is descriptive and start to pretend that it is prescriptive. Like it's telling me what I should do. And rather than going, no, man, they kept in some of the stuff that if you were trying to whitewash this and create it, you'd erase it. And there was all the opportunity in the world to do so, and they didn't. And so I think the flaws of the individuals in the scripture, to me, lend to its trustworthiness. Because if everyone was squeaky clean, now I'm dealing with a conspiracy.
Yep.
We coordinated this, we talked to each other, don't tell anybody about when I denied him, don't tell anybody about that thing Abraham and Sarah did in Egypt. You leave it out, and it's not there, which tends to move me towards authenticity in the records that are kept. And so I think that's another piece that always, for me, has been a helpful thought. And why is it trustworthy? But, okay. Number 2, here we go. How do you know if you are reaching your full potential in life?
I don't think you ever can.
Right.
Yes.
I would say my life is as full as it possibly can be right now. Am I reaching my fullest potential? I don't know. I try to do the best that I can with each of my days and go where I feel like the Lord is calling me to go. I don't always do that, but I would say go where you feel like the Lord's leading you, and He'll continue to encourage you and provide for your every needs. But that's a hard question.
It's easier to look backwards
Yeah.
and say, was I doing the best I could? right? Was I having the fulfillment? And of course, I'm human, and I didn't. And I think we had talked earlier about where God is, right? That he doesn't have a plan B. And so our lives, even though we don't think they're fulfilled, that we made bad mistakes as we look back, God used those to make who we are. And so the mistakes that we had, that we did, now we can talk to people and say where God has brought us. So when I look at it, I go, oh my gosh, that was, as a Christian, I was not a good person. You know, I did the wrong things. I was sinning. And God says, I use those crises that you were experiencing. You can talk to people, and they also built you up. You know, that, you know, we grow through our trials, right? We grow in our faith, trusting in him through those real difficult times that maybe we weren't following him or being as fulfilled as we should have been.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I think one of the other things that, like the mindset for younger folks, there can be this trap you fall into that if only I get to this next thing, if I reach this point,
Yes,
I'm
yes.
good. But based on where I'm at, looking back, you know, at 36, I'm at a place where I've realized like the state of being alive is constantly arriving. You're never at a point where you're like, yep, I'm here, I've made it. I'm always working towards something. And the sooner you get comfortable with that fact, and then, you know, also, of course, lean into the Spirit, you know, try and, you know, go as close to the teachings as you can. But I think, like, it's a false mindset to think that, oh, now I've reached this and everything's going to be okay. Because it's just, there's always something else after that.
I think the trap in that too is if I have that mindset, then I'm going to put off what's in front of me today because I'll actually start doing that once I get to here. You know, and so then, you know, Jesus talks about like, hey, let today be today. Let today be today. And if I can trap myself in looking so far into the future that I miss the person right in front of me right now, or the opportunity that Jesus has for me today, right now, because I'm worried about fulfilling my potential in life. Meanwhile, I'm missing life.
Amen.
I'm missing out on life. Yeah. Oh.
And that assumes that we even know what our potential is.
Right.
Right? I mean, Moses didn't know what his potential was, did
Yeah,
he?
that's a great
It's like he just do what's next. You know, that's my thing. It's just do what's next. And trust God. Yeah.
Yeah, Moses actually tried to downplay his potential.
Right?
Like, I can't do that.
And I think, trust God with our potential.
All right, how about this? How should we set ourselves apart to be holy and righteous when we are in the world?
I think we are set apart because as we look more like Christ each and every day, we look less like the world. And so I think if we continue to strive to look more and more like Jesus, and as we allow him to change our heart's desire, we look different. And so I don't think as much as how should we set ourselves apart. I think I don't think that it's a choice in the midst of it, because the more you look like Christ, the less you look like the world.
I read a quote earlier this morning, that said, in describes our location and of describes our source of information. So I'm going to leave you in the world, but don't be of the world. In is my location, but of is my source of information. So while I'm in this location, what will I allow to be the thing that informs my life? Will I allow, and the warning is, don't be of the world. Don't let the world be the thing that's informing you. Rather, through the daily renewing of your mind. And so this I'm going to leave you in this location behind enemy lines, but the information that I need you to be acting on is the word and community and worship, because if you can let that be the thing that informs your mind, then your location is pretty irrelevant.
And those concrete things, so I tend to go, what is that person asking me? How can I, right? And I think what you just said is be in the Word. Go to the worship. Whatever your mission that God has given you, right? Is praying every morning, God, help me through this. Help me to face this day. And then realize our saint said, why do I do what I don't want to do? And what I want to do, I don't, right? and say, he's got it. I'm going to fall. And he says the righteous man gets up 7 times, right? And so it's by prayer. I think every single question we can say, just go to prayer.
Yep.
Just go to prayer. Just go to prayer. And we can finish. But
Yeah.
that's a big one, is just every day just start. God, I'm going to mess up. I need help.
All right, so this next question is going to bring a little bit of culture into faith, especially a topic that seems to be on the forefront, certainly within the last decade. So how do we balance Christian individuals' experiences with homosexuality and our interpretation of what the Bible teaches? And then there's a little side note that they put in, said, also, if you have any book recommendations on this, which I appreciate, someone who would just be a learner. So how do we balance Christian individuals' experiences with homosexuality and our interpretation of what the Bible teaches?
Well, I just think with anything that's in the Word, we have to let the Word be elevated over experience. You know, experiences with really any sin. I mean, premarital sex. That was more. I think when I was growing up, it was more premarital sex and being married, and now that's fully become accepted in the culture that people almost don't even consider it sin or ungodly. And so the experiences, I think you have a lot of people even in the church having premarital sex, and so we're trying to let experience normalize something, and just because something is common doesn't make it right, and so whatever we experience a lot doesn't make it holy, doesn't make it right, doesn't make God's word any less true. Let God be true and every man a liar. And I think our experiences and our feelings can lie to us, and we just have to be really, really careful. I mean, our feelings can be strong, and there are people who have that real strong feeling. And I think Dusty covered it really well when he said, we can have a strong feeling towards any kind of really sin. I can have a really strong feeling to gossip, you guys. So does that make gossiping right? If it's just like, oh, I just can't wait to go do that, and it's like, I take pleasure in that or whatever, it doesn't make it right. It's still hurtful and wrong and terrible and bad, and it may be common. It's common, but it's still wrong, and so something that's common doesn't make it right. And I did have some book recommendations.
I'll make sure we add it in the link below on the video.
Yeah.
You sent that over to me.
Yeah.
The other thing we actually talked about sexual sin in the month before, and I mean, literally, I could read this question: how do we balance Christian individuals' experience with infidelity and our interpretation, with premarital sex and with masturbation? Like,
Right.
it's sexual sin, and it falls into the same. So I can move homosexuality to that and put every other sexual sin inside of it, and we're still dealing with the same topic.
Right.
It is, for better or for worse, probably for worse, our culture has decided to reshuffle which ones are worse and which ones are better. And I think what's interesting, so just to culturally push on you a little bit, Gina, is what's interesting about today is that our world and our culture has decided that sexuality and identity are the same thing. Gossip and identity aren't the same thing, but they've said sexual. So anytime, like you could say that about gossip and everyone would nod their head and say yes. But the minute we start talking about sexuality, all of a sudden what our world has told us, what our culture has told us, is now you're denying me my existence because my identity is what I do with my body parts. And that's not, it's so diminishing to our true identity, is this like appetite or hunger that each of us has, just in a different way. And to say that's the most of who you are is like heartbreaking to me. Like, the most of who I am is my sexual desires, and I'm like, man, I think we're probably wrong. And so I look at this and I go, it's easy to throw homosexuality in this question. I could throw every other sexual sin in this question and say that it's still a valid question, and the answer's still the same.
Right.
The answer's still the same. That not all desires, not all appetites, not all experiences are healthy and good for me, for my community, for someone else. And so what God's offering through the word is like, this is where life happens. And so if you dive into this and follow this, I know it's hard, I know it's against your desires and appetites, man, this is where you're going to find life. And it shows up in every other part of who we
And
are.
I think it really comes down to trust. You know, do you trust God that He's good and that the way He made you is really the best for you? And it's this inner struggle of any time that we have our own desires and there's God's desire, and when they're in conflict, and maybe for heterosexuals that's not in conflict, so they're like, this is not a conflict for you, so you don't have to deal with that conflict. So it doesn't seem fair to people who maybe are experiencing that conflict. But we all have conflict with God, and it's ultimately when we say, okay, I believe your will is better than mine. Because, and I think the thing that breaks my heart so much, because there's so many people, I was surprised at how many people raised their hand at our last question thing, that they knew people who were struggling with, who had a friend or knew somebody, or honestly, let's be real, there probably were people in that audience who
100%.
were experiencing that same thing, and they're not asking for a friend, they're asking for themselves. And the compassion that we want to have for them, and the kindness, and realize these are real battles going on in people's minds, is that God loves you so much that you can trust Him with your identity. And that all goes back to even the question with baptism. It's like, I'm dying. And the homosexual will be like, do you understand that that's like death to me? To not practice what I want to practice. And that's kind of like, yeah, that's what baptism's about. Dead and upcoming. You're created, and you're a new creature in Christ Jesus. Trust Him, because He's so good. And Satan wants to send you down a path that you can't so easily unravel. He wants to take your life down a path that puts such a wedge between God's will and your will that, you know, and the path that God wants you to send down is so much better, but it's trust and faith. Yeah.
This one's about the Bible. Another one about the Bible. Here we go. If there are metaphors throughout the Bible that aren't specifically clarified as metaphors, then how can we know for sure that Jesus or His sacrifice wasn't a metaphor?
Yeah, so it'd be tough to I'd really like to know what this person's getting after with the question. Like a lot of these questions, it's like I wish the person was sitting right in front of me.
Yeah.
But I think we can kind of go back to the response we gave to a certain extent about the reliability of the Bible, right? So if you look at the resurrection as a historic event, right? You look at all types of non-Christian sources, there's no doubt about it. You know, about 2,000 years ago, there was a man on this earth, his name was Jesus. He lived for 33 to 36 years, and he died, and by the crucifixion, right? And then there's all types of evidence, both in terms of what's in the Bible and what other non-Christian authors are saying, is that, you know, the resurrection happened, right? There was a huge movement that born out of this very specific historic event, right?
Or at least that witnesses said the resurrection happened when you talk about the extra biblical stuff.
And
Yeah.
everyone
Correct.
would love to have found Jesus' body.
Right, exactly. So where's the body? So from the most basic point in terms of whether whether the question is about, you know, was this a historic event or not? I think that there's really good evidence from Christian and non-Christian sources pointing to that the event happened and that you know, Christ did resurrect. I mean, perhaps the real question is, you know, did He die for our sins, or, you know, was substitutionary atonement in place, something like that. But if the real question is, do we have, you know, reliability that the resurrection as a historic event occurred? I would say that we do.
We don't die for metaphors.
Yeah.
And like you just said, those are witnesses that
right.
walked on this earth with Him,
Absolutely.
or walked with people who had walked and talked with Him, who had seen the miracles that He had done, who had seen the resurrection. And you don't die for that. You don't have a brutal death for that. You know, they have felt that spirit inside of them, and they know this is not a metaphor. And it goes back to, what is your real question? You know, on some of these, it's, what are you asking on this question?
There's also, you know, at the more macro level, so if there are metaphors throughout the Bible, there are, is the understanding that you're walking into a library. Every time you open the Bible, you're walking into a library. There's poetry, there's music, there's history, there's historical narrative, there's biography, and at times they lay over one another. There's philosophy. I mean, Paul is writing, and then he's quoting Greek philosophers at one point, or he's writing, and then he's quoting David's poetry at one point. Like Jesus is speaking and teaching, and then he's quoting, and so there's some of it is understanding what am I reading? Because I always say, if you walk into a library and you go over Shakespeare and you take it literally, you're going to be led astray. But if I walk into a library and I go over and read, and I open a book about the Civil War and I pretend like it's poetry, I'm going to be misled. And so taking the time to understand what am I reading and how did they interpret it? Not how do I interpret it. It was written to human beings that lived and walked. How did they understand what they were reading? If I can do that, then I can decipher what's metaphor, what's not, and from there, you can step in with greater degrees of confidence when people have questions and they say something like, "Well, wasn't that a metaphor?" Well, no, this is historical narrative. You can see the track of it, and it's always been interesting to me because I think I fell into this. It's probably all metaphor, or it's probably meant just to be good life lessons and fables, and I fell into a lot of that when I was young because it was more convenient. Honestly, it was more convenient to treat it as all metaphor because then I can't be held accountable to metaphor.
That's good.
Is it wrong to hop from church to church?
That's a good question, and I am hopping right now from church to church. I'll be honest. I don't know if it's called hopping, but I'll answer that in two ways. Is I think God can lead us to different churches. So if God's leading you to another church for a reason, then that's what you should be doing. But if you're hopping, trying to find a perfect church or a perfect group, or you're missing things that you think you should have out of this church, or the pastor said something wrong, and I'm going to go to that church, and that pastor said something wrong, and you keep hopping and hopping, I disagree with that. But to have the Spirit come over you, I think we had through COVID a movement of the Spirit that a lot of people left churches. A lot of very senior people left Shoreline. A lot of senior people left Randall's church and Calvary Capo Beach, and they went to other churches. And I've talked to people that said they're at that church, those churches are blossoming, and they have a senior person there now, that they're being used by God. And so God can have a movement where, I don't want to use the word hopping, but that he can say, hey, I am shaking this thing up, and we're going to have a revival in our churches, and we're going to have new people come to all these different little churches, that we need senior people. I don't mean by age, I mean by wisdom, to sit there and talk to these people.
But I have scripture that comes to my mind on that, and not talking about seasoned people, maybe moving from here to there. I think what you're saying is totally valid. God shifts things around. Like Paul says, I'm going to go back and visit the churches. Scripture that popped in my mind when I read that is the scripture that says, know those who labor among you. And if you are bouncing from here to here to here, nobody's going to really know you. You're not probably going to be laboring among people because you can't serve, because you're not staying long enough to build relationships that you can be accountable, that your gifts can start flowing, that other people, their gifts can pour into your life. And so it's like, it's family. And the more family gets together, we can encourage one another, we can hold one another accountable, we can sharpen one another, sparks fly when people get together, and you can make each other sharper and wiser, and you can't become that axe that's dull, and so I just feel like, stay somewhere long enough. If the person who's asking this question is feeling like, I love it here, and I love it here, and I love it here, and I love all these churches, well, what's not to love about Jesus? If Jesus is at all those churches, gosh, I love church too. But find a place where you can know and be known. And be used and do your chores in the household.
I think that plays probably the largest piece that I would say too is some of its heart motive. Like it's again this I wish that you were here so we could talk about why you ask this question. Because there's a negative side of this where I'm being consumeristic and it's not measuring up. This church doesn't meet my standard, and so I will go find the perfect church.
There
Bad
isn't.
news, you're not gonna find like it's not out
not
there.
there.
But then there is this side, and so like Jim, I know that you have an amazing life group that is connected, and no matter where you're going on Sunday, you're going and you're getting fed, and you're
You're
plugging in,
accountable.
and and your core community isn't changing
Right.
at all, like because you put in deep roots in that core community, and so there's a number of reasons why you may shift the place that you go worship on a Sunday. I don't know that that's what church means. In fact, I know that's not what church
Right.
means. Biblically, church was ecclesia, the gathering of believers. Church is a German word that means house of God. That's where they got that. And so, where you're going to worship, I think you're right, Gina. There's a place that I've got to kind of find home, place roots, and start serving others and serve alongside. But Jim, to your point, boy, the thing that's most important is that tight community and not hopping out of that all the time, because then you are going to be alone and unafraid, and that's exactly what the enemy's looking for, so that he can grab you. So I think if you've got a consumer mindset about it, you're going to fail every time. You're going to keep hopping. If you're moving where the Lord is leading you, but you're still deep in community, however your community is built, you're still deep in a community of believers who know you. Go see. One of the funny things, I'll just say, and I'll be quiet. I get to travel a bunch, and so I get to go internationally and be in other churches. And anytime they give me opportunity to stand up and talk, I say, we have a silly saying in the U.S. that's called home church. And Jesus never described a home church. And so thank you for welcoming me home to the church in all the ways that it's expressive. Thank you. It's good to be home. And that has been really healthy for me to make sure that I stay rooted in the big ecclesia, the gathering. So,
And that's your word he used on the question. It connotates hopping, right?
Yep.
But to say I'm going to multiple churches, because I do the same in Mexico. Right? I have multiple pastors, and I talk to them. I'm saying, you are my brothers and sisters. You are my pastor. I'm hopping, but I don't think he's asking that kind of hopping.
yeah. Okay, this one is I actually had to pre-read on this one because I didn't even know, to be honest. All right, here we go. Why do the books of Malachi and Zechariah cover the same events? I know, I wrote it wrong. Why do the books of Malachi and Zechariah cover the same events, and what's the difference between the two books? So these are minor prophets books.
Post-exilic minor prophets. But I thought so you had Matthew in there.
I did, I was
And
wrong.
I'm like, okay, they both cover the I'm a big fan of the book of Zechariah, but I was like,
So in
There you go.
fairness, I have Matthew and Zechariah, not
Well-
same events.
well,
not
I know
same-
actually Haggai and Zechariah actually were prophesied concurrently at the same time.
Interesting.
Yes, they were both post-exile prophets, and they were to stir the hearts of the people to rebuild the temple when they came out of Babylon.
Yeah.
So, and they were shooting at different goals. Haggai is short, brief, wow, to the point, get the sword up. And Zechariah is longer, encouraging, or hand-holding, but they're both prophetic books to stir the heart of the people, to rebuild the temple. And the actual temple, that though they cry and they're like, oh, it's not as nice as the first one, it's like, this is a temple that Jesus came to.
Yeah.
So do not despise the day of small things. So it's an amazing book, but then it still kind of would be like Matthew, because it's not fully fulfilled. So, there's the already but not yet tension there, that some of the prophecies have been fulfilled already, but some of them not yet. And so they're exciting books. And I think the biggest thing about all those books is God's in the midst. You're in really hard times.
Yeah.
You have something to look forward to. Isn't that what all the prophetic and apocalyptic books are? Hang in there. Hang on. You're surrounded by rubble, but God's going to do something wonderful with your rubble.
Great answer.
I also like the idea that because there's tons of concurrent scripture. I mean,
Right.
once you get into the Gospels, you have the Synoptic Gospels, where they're kind of side by side. I think we're going to talk about that. But I mean, Chronicles and Kings overlap each other, and what I enjoy about that is the idea of perspective. Oftentimes, we'll talk and I'll be like, okay, so if I hold this up, the side of the label that you can see is not the side of the label that I can see. It's not the same part and so having different perspectives allow us to see the full picture. And so even when there's scripture, prophetic, non-prophetic, even when there's scripture that overlaps, I think it's really useful because you get a different perspective on this same event. And what God is giving different people to see and speak into the same event allows you to get a fuller picture of what it is that's happening. There's I think it's an old Indian kind of wisdom piece that talks about 5 blind men trying to identify what an elephant is. And, and they're all feeling it, and one goes, oh, it's like a snake, and the other one goes, oh, it's like a tree trunk, oh, it's like a wall, because none of them can see the full picture because they're blind, so all they can see is what's in front of them. And yet if you take all of those descriptions and you put them together, like, oh yeah, that's an elephant. And so I think that's the neat thing about the scripture too, this library of the text, is that you get a ton of neat perspectives that move in and out. All right. How should I face the fear of being single my entire life?
I like that someone who's in their 20s said, I'm fearful I'm going to be single my entire life. Like, if I'm not married by this point, that means I'm going to be single for the rest of my life. And so I think, how should I face the how should I face the fear? I think, how do you face fear, things that are fearful in your life anyway? You give it up to God, but also you unpack some of that fear. Why am I so fearful of the thought of being single? Like, what makes me fearful of that? Is that I will never get married, I'll never have a friendship like that, I will never X, Y, and Z, whatever follows that. And so I think unpacking some of that, what makes you so fearful? Because I mean, Paul said it, when you're single, you're able to serve the Lord just without any other attachments in the midst of that. And so I think that is a blessing if that's what you're being called to. And so I don't think that's fearful, but I think address why fear is, why you're feeling the
Why
feelings
that's
of
the
fear.
thing
Yeah,
that's coming
absolutely.
up.
And I would say for me, one encouragement I had when I was kind of in this phase where I was single and those around me were starting their families, and I had this fear of, hey, I'm falling behind, and I feel like it's been placed in my heart that I want a family more than ever, and I'm farther than from it. I'm not even dating anybody, but I saw this vision of what I wanted, right? And I had the opportunity. I have a coworker here at Shoreline, kind of a spiritual mentor, brought me into the faith, brought me to Shoreline, and we were traveling together for work, and we were talking about this over dinner, and he said something that really struck me. This idea that if God has put it on your heart, if God really intends this for your life, He's got the power to make it happen, right? So you wouldn't necessarily be feeling this way or having these urges in such a way that God may not be able to deliver on that. So, but to your point as well, I think there's so much. The Bible is replete with examples of single people being very successful lives and folks being called to single living and all that. So I would say, and to double down on your point originally, like there's plenty of time. Like, I mean, I didn't meet my spouse until 33. Like there's plenty of time, and God has a way of making these things work out in His time. Unfortunately, that's often not the timing that you may want it to.
Right.
And the deeper question is, I think, whatever you're experiencing, your angst today, whatever fear it is, because I think it's not just singlehood. You're going to get in another situation where you're going to feel like this is every day for the rest of my life, And whether it's you're in debt or you're in physical pain, you might have, there's something that can be so overwhelming that my bad day today is a forever. This is the rest of my life, and just if we can just get through. And when I look at people who do like suicide or something, I'm like, if you could have just gone to bed and got up the next morning, just get through a day. Just if today's really bad, don't think that tomorrow is going to be, give that day open-handed to God and trust Him for your tomorrows, because He has good tomorrows. And don't let the fear of your current situation overwhelm you. Because even if your situation stayed the same, you change.
Yeah.
And you change and you change and you change, and tomorrow is always going to be different.
On that, Dean and I have a fun saying, and I kind of brought it into our marriage, but I say, this is where champions are made. And it came from playing collegiate soccer, and when we were exhausted running up the hill for the 25th time, that's what we'd yell, like, this is where champions are made. And I think you don't grow when things are easy. You grow when things are hard, when you're exhausted. You learn to use new muscles that God gave you from the start, and He's teaching you things along the way. So, beautiful explanation.
I would just give one more warning in the midst of this question, which is good decisions are never made from a position of fear.
Amen.
So-
That's good.
So if your fear is centered around being single and you think that that fear is relieved by marriage, you are more likely to make a bad choice about who's going to, and you're going to put them on a pedestal that they don't belong. So like, good decisions are never made in a position of fear. So just, Joe, you and I were in similar positions. We were married, divorced. You're dealing with a ton of baggage about, I know I want to do this, but do I really want to do this?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So there's that, and there's a point where you have to let some of that fear go and just trust that if I make a decision out of fear, I'm going to end up in the same spot that I was. And so I just, that'd be my only.
Let me add
Yeah,
1
please.
second into that
Yeah.
thing. Just because when we compare marriage to something bad, it isn't, right? I mean, in the Bible, it's compared to something fantastic. John was talking this morning about in Genesis, that's marriage. As we look at our relationship with Jesus, that's marriage, right? It's an amazing relationship that we look forward to. So I can understand when a person is saying that, I don't want to be alone because I see great marriages around me and my friends have great marriages. And when I was a youth counselor, I remember we were at the beach and we had a bunch of kids speak. And I think there's 7 kids that spoke that came from divorced families. And it was heart-wrenching. I mean, we were bawling. Our spirits were crushed by these kids speaking of living on the streets, of the new boyfriend having, wrong kind of feelings towards these girls. And just think of the disasters. And when they asked me to speak at the end, I told these kids who were this age of this group and down, from 15 up, I said, every one of you, remember this talk when you're looking for your husband or wife. God wants our marriages to be forever because the pain afterwards. And so, yes, desire it, pray for your spouse right now, look forward to it, and just like Abraham and Sarah, it could be a long time, or like Jesus, right? Like Paul, you might not, but as Joe said, He will prepare you whatever direction that's going to be, and don't be afraid. Sorry.
So next question is, how much should we tithe?
That's funny. I was waiting for someone just to answer it, and I was like, well.
Let's put it this way. Let's put it this way. How about this? Because I think the Old Testament had very clear rules about tithing. Jesus gets asked about it, and he points to a widow and her 2 mites.
Right.
There's, later on, Paul talks about giving with a generous heart. So rather than answering a question, how much should we tithe, as though it is a math formula, because it is not anymore. I guess my question, maybe more individually, is how do each of you navigate generosity? Because I think we think of tithing as though it's the salary we pay God versus the opportunity that we have to participate and to decouple ourselves from materialism.
It's
So
the entrance fee.
how do
I
you navigate generosity?
When I first became a Christian, where I just first started dating, there was a compelled feeling to give, where I had, I didn't go to church before, so didn't really see the passing around and stuff, but there was a compulsion to give. And, I went into, as I became a believer, I mean, it's obvious, tithe means 10th, everybody knows that, so I think I got rigid with that for a season of my life where it was a tenth. Then we Lance and I went into some Bible studies, Crown Ministries, different financial Bible studies that really started digging a little deeper into giving and your motivation and whose stuff is it all anyway?
Right. Amen.
You know, and the scriptures and what giving is about. And I've come to realize it's just all grace anyways. It's a how much of your stuff do you want back, Lord? It's all yours. You're going to let me keep this much percent and let me steward it well. And so I think tithing has become more of stewardship. And it is nice to if you say you take a tenth, at least you're evaluating how much you take in. And you're saying, oh, am I proportioning it out? It starts making you at least budget and assess, and you're not lazy with your finances, and so you don't have to give a tenth, you can give 1%, but I think consistent giving to the Lord and acknowledging it's all His, and then whatever it's all His, He takes it all, and then He leaves me some to be a steward over. And how do I use what He's left of His in my hands?
You guys are much better Bible understanding or memorizers than I am, but there's a scripture in 2 Timothy. It might be in 6, might be 1 Timothy. It could be Titus. It's one of the T books.
There you go.
with a number in front of it. Could be Thessalonians even. But he actually exhorts the people. And he says that you are the richest generation. That's us.
Yeah,
Anybody that's
for
asking
sure,
that
yeah.
question is one of the richest generations in the world, in the history of the world. And then you say, okay, what's he say if he's screaming at us about this, right? And he says a key point, and it's exactly what you just said. He says, don't be arrogant about your wealth because it comes from him. And his immediate line after that, he says, be generous. Right? So I ask that person, or tell that person, or however you want to use the wording, is be generous. If God brings something to you, because we're in His Word, we are waking up talking to Him, we have a relationship with Him. As I told you guys earlier, we don't have a chair, but if there's a chair, He should be right here or right there, maybe right here, is just God, bring the things to me. You've given me the funds, they're yours. And we'll just give. And I tell Sherry at times, I look back and I go, I have no idea what we gave. But I know we are, and we don't give for this reason, but we are overwhelmingly blessed. And I say, and I have never done this in my 40 plus years, but in the last probably 8 years, is because I'm involved in a ministry, is I pray for other people's finances all the time. And I never even thought about doing that in the past. Why would I pray for your finances or your finances or your finances? And it's not for the money to come to me. It's that you guys see where God wants to give you. And then you have that. And for that person that asked the question about the wife or the husband, there's the battle. When one wants to give everything and you want to give less. And that changes every Sunday.
That's a completely it's a different question.
Sorry.
Yeah, and for me, in terms of I don't know if it's going to answer the question directly, but I came to faith as a 30-year-old, and at that point, I had a lot of my routines set in ways. So getting to this point of tithing or graciously giving was hard. It was one of the harder spiritual disciplines to make that adjustment that far into my life. And when I was dating my wife, she was going to Mariners Mission Viejo, so Jeff McGuire was the pastor. And I've heard a lot of messages on the topic of giving, as I'm sure everybody has, right? And for whatever reason, the message he gave that day stuck out to me. And basically he would say, hey, we've got a very generous church body here. I don't need your money. We're blessed, happy to have it, but we don't need it. He's like, I'm urging you, give your money away for you, right? This is a spiritual discipline for you to divorce yourself from the need for money. By demonstrating you can give it up, that means whatever. So he's like, give it to a charity, give it to anybody. So that stuck with me. And then the way kind of like me and my wife practically approach it from that standpoint is, we certainly have a specific number set aside that we give to Shoreline every month. Boom, it's on, auto deposit. And I know there's a debate, should we do auto deposit, should we not? It's fine to me. Like if you feel compelled, put it on lock and submit it every month, right? And then we also take another portion that we set into a separate account, right? And that's what we're using kind of as a fund for as stuff comes up, right? If somebody in my life group needs something, if my wife does a ministry for bringing meals out, it'll go towards that, or nieces and nephews to go to, summer Bible camp, something like that, right? That's where that will come out. And at the end of the year, whatever's left in that account, like she can do with it of a third she wants, I do with it of a third I want, and then the other third we come together and talk about what we want to do with it, right? And for us, that's been a good way to do it. So, yeah.
I like the fact that it said, how much should we give, rather than how much can we give. And I think changing the posture of what we do, like, can I give it all away? Like, well, I mean, you do have to pay your bills. Like, give to Caesar what is his, because you can't go, you know what, I'm not going to pay the IRS because I don't trust the IRS, so I'm going to give it all to God. And when the IRS comes to me, I'm going to go, sorry, I gave it to the man upstairs. And so I think changing the heart posture too, and just in my career, I always love hearing why people want to participate in something. And I said, if you give your time and you give of your resources, you're more connected. And so I think it's the opportunity to participate even more. So rather than how much should we tithe, I would say more, how much can we give? How much can we give, and how much do you want to give to see God at work in your own life and in other ministries?
I just think generosity is fun. And so the two pieces that I'll say, one was a personal challenge that I put on myself early on to see, like, can I do this? And not only in generosity, but in personal pride, right? And so I've been reading about, here's the Pharisee that says this great prayer, but he does it in public. Here's the guy who gives, but he does it in public so everybody can see. And you've gotten all the reward that you were going to get, kind of thing. And so early in my faith, I challenged myself to be overly generous in this one area, which is completely relative. That's relative to you. And the widow's 2 mites was overly generous, right? So whatever it is for you. So I was to be overly generous in one area and then never tell anyone about what you did. And I've yet to tell anyone. Khalid's like, you could tell me though. And I'm like, I'm not telling anyone. But what it did for me is it did 2 things. Number one, it showed me that I could in fact respond with what for me was excessive generosity and survive and be okay. And number 2, for a good 2 years, it made it clear how proud I was, because I constantly wanted to tell people. I constantly wanted to tell people how cool this thing was and how generous. And so, like, it also then started to work on my heart about, what are you being generous for? Why? Is it for you so that you can get elevated, or is it for him? And then the other piece of this, the practical piece that I would say, is Khalid and I do something very similar in terms of how we budget and how we set aside funds to be spontaneously generous. So, which my friends think are funny because we're budgeting for spontaneity. But the thing is, because we do it, we never slow down in a yes. We're never put in a position where we hear a need and we go, I don't know if we can pull that off. And we know that we want to respond when the Holy Spirit gives us an opportunity. And so we've ensured that we always can. I have a buddy who he teaches Financial Peace University. And the challenge that he always gives people when he gets to the week on generosity is he goes, I want you to take $100 in cash and just carry it in your front pocket. And the goal is by the end of this process, I want you to have given it all away. You could have done it all at once. You could have done it in steps. But whatever it is, I want it in your front pocket so that you can respond immediately, whether that's to buy that single mom's meal, whether that's to do that. He's like, just keep it in your front pocket because I want you to learn what it looks like when you can respond. Because much of what FPU is seeking to do, what Financial Peace University is seeking to do is to put you in a position, as you progress through your life, to always be able to respond in generosity. And so those are some of the tangible practices I think that help with this idea of changing it from a should to a can, and tithing from this idea of a duty to a delight, to an opportunity for generosity. All right. Does the fruit of the Spirit and obedience ever contradict one another?
I was trying to understand that question.
Is he
when I
going
read
off
it.
of
I mean,
So is I guess the question could be, is there ever any call towards obedience that is going to ask you to do something that is not in line with the fruit of the Spirit?
So don't be faithful, don't be good,
Joyful or
Don't be
patient.
I know, I was
Don't be
thinking-
kind.
don't be, have self-control.
Yeah,
I immediately went to the of course, Galatians 5:22 is going through my mind. Okay,
Oh,
love,
no.
joy, peace. Should
When
I,
would we not do those
would I not be
things?
patient? Would I not be, self-control, and all those things? And I don't know how obedience would come in conflict with that.
I agree with you. Yeah. I read this as well and was like, I don't know how that could be possible.
How they could conflict.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, doesn't it say, let the peace of God rule and reign in your heart? Often it's the fruit of the Spirit that leads me and guides me. I mean, we talk about it, I don't have a peace about that. I'm feeling like, no, I shouldn't do that. That makes me feel anxious, I mean, not that we can't feel anxious about like being bold or other stuff like that. Courage is different, but I'm just talking about, tranquility. God gives us a tranquil spirit, and so when we're obedient, so I don't know. No, I'd say no.
I don't think they can either.
And I think whoever asked this question, I would say unpack it with someone. Like, why do you feel like you...
Right.
What's the call to obedience that you're feeling?
that you're struggling, and what is that? Is it obedience to someone who is counter to what the Lord is calling us to? So I would say this is a heavy question. I think there's some weight behind it, and so whoever asked that, I would suggest unpacking it with someone who is following the Lord closely.
Because it could also be the other side of that, is unpacking what element of the fruit of the fruit of the Spirit. Like, are you misperceiving what love means? Well, I love Him, and yet obedience is calling me to contradict. It's rightly understanding what each of those. So there's probably a better conversation than a blind.
Yes.
Maybe resubmit that question to us, phrased a little differently. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, next question. How do you draw someone to Christianity who is a firm supporter of same-sex marriage when the church historically doesn't stand for it? And then there's a little bit of a qualifier here. We have somebody who gave us some background, Joe.
Okay, great.
I have a friend with a gay family member who they love more than anyone. She's intrigued by Christianity, but this is a major roadblock to further exploring it. So that's our background. Question again. How do you draw someone to Christianity who's a firm supporter of same-sex marriage when the church historically doesn't stand for it?
This was a question I struggled with in terms of coming to the Lord. I've several acquaintances, close family friends who are gay, right? And the biggest example I have is when I was in graduate school, I had a friend who ultimately, and I actually don't know if this individual is Christian or not, and this was years ago, maybe 14 years ago when I was in grad school. She's since moved on, and she's opened a restaurant in the Minneapolis area that recidivists, so they hire people who have been convicted of felonies. They come to her restaurant, they do a fellowship, they cook grilled cheese, and they graduate out of this restaurant and they become back integrated into the community. And it's just like, if this person is out doing this, which I'm clearly reading is like, this to me is what the Bible is telling me to do. This is what I believe like Jesus would have done. And I see her doing these tremendous works. But then, you wrestle with this question. It was difficult because I know a lot of people who are, secular, I guess in this case, who are doing these good works, right? And one of the things that's kind of helped me on this question, or I think can kind of help guide, although it's not the exact answer to this specific question, is I was watching a discussion with Tim Keller, right? And the question came up is, does homosexuality send somebody to hell, right? This is a topic, right? And Tim comes back with this response that, being gay sends you to hell as much as being straight sends you to heaven, right? Like, neither of those things are connected, but by that simple statement, which is very easy to remember, it launches you into like the ability to, one, share the gospel. What does that mean? What does it mean to be saved, And then two, a discussion of sin. What is sin, right? Like, sin, in which homosexuality is one of many things, right? One of many sins in the church. Culture seems to be really focused on homosexuality, and these culture issues as we've discussed. But I mean, look at greed, look at, drunkenness, look at so many sins that are so prevalent and so tolerated in the church, that my answer would be to start and ensure that this individual has a good understanding of what the gospel is, what that means, how salvation is achieved, and then I'll open up the discussion on sin, and sin is likely not what they thought that it was in terms of their perception of a non-Christian's perception of sin, and talk through those steps and then see maybe if that you can get some traction that way. So it didn't really answer their question, but just some helpful insight on the topic in general, I think.
And I think just drawing people to the Lord. We don't have to change their political position. So I think we worry too much about people's so homosexuality is maybe a little bit more in your face. You're very aware of that person's sin, maybe because it's more obvious as opposed to all the other ones. And so I think maybe the people who are witnessing are held back a little bit because they know, oh, you're not going to want to come to church because you know that the Bible calls this a sin. But I think people are hungry for God, the real risen Christ and who he is. And just present Jesus. Just be Jesus, present Jesus, and all those other things fall away. The natural man doesn't understand the things of the Spirit. So we're not trying to change people's, I'm pro-life, but I'm not going to go around, I'm not going to focus my whole life on pro-life or lower taxes or whatever else I believe in, because I believe if I elevate Christ, then when people come to know Jesus, everything else in life works out. I mean, I found myself, even as a believer, when I first became a Christian, I was like, I think I'm going to vote differently. It just naturally happened because God changes our heart. And it's the same way with the homosexual person. They know they need God. They know, just like a thirsty person, maybe they don't realize they're thirsty. Maybe you can be really, really thirsty and not realize it. But at one point, you're going to become so dehydrated, you're going to realize I thirst. And just present Jesus. He's the only refreshment for our sin. And I say just don't worry about it. Just love homosexual people like you love everybody else. I think we're worrying too much about not sharing with them.
Yeah, it's interesting so when I first came to faith, it was through this conversational class called Starting Point, and in its first iteration, it was very apologetic in nature, and so it was like 10 chapters that were all based on separate subjects that that a non-believer might be asking. And about 5 years into it, they rewrote the curriculum and put it back out, and they removed all of it. And it all of a sudden became this 8-week conversation that only had one question: who is Jesus?
Amen. I
The
love it.
whole thing moved away, and now it processed through that over 8 weeks, and it essentially was pointing back to, here's Jesus walking with the disciples. He just got done teaching, and he goes, hey, who do the crowd say I am? And they list out all of these interesting conversation starters, and then he goes, great. Let me ask you an essential question. Who do you say I am? Because if we can't land on that, then everything else, because the truth is this, is you could give a great, very well thought out and kind response to this question. Another question is going to be right after it. And another question is going to be right after it. Well, were Adam and Eve real? Is it 7 days? Is it a regional flood? Is it a global? These are all interesting questions, but if I can't land on first just simply showing Jesus, right? Christ crucified, that's all I know. I don't know how to unpack this one, but I do know Christ crucified, is let me get you to get to know Jesus. If we can answer that question, then from that, when we land on that, we can plant our feet on that, all of a sudden we can start addressing how do I navigate the rest of this world now that I've responded to that question. And I think that's it feels similar to it feels like a sidestep, but I don't think it is. Actually, it's the root thing. Yeah.
It's a root thing.
What is the difference between waiting on the Lord and falling into passivity? It's the difference between waiting on the Lord and just being passive.
Fun little analogy. So I was probably shouldn't say analogy, fun story to go with this. I was probably 24, 25. I was at Sano, and just in a sweet spot of life. I went down to Mexico probably every other weekend with St. Clooney Presbyterian Church, and just loving it. But I feel like I was just kind of stuck in this place that I was like, I'm not growing, but I'm having a blast. And I'm sitting out at San Onofre in the water, and people are catching great waves on my left and right. And I sat there and I'm like, it's a beautiful day, the water's warm, it's a beautiful sunny day, and just loving it. And I thought, but I'm missing the action. I'm missing the action of why I came out to surf. I didn't just come to sit out in the water. And so I think waiting on the Lord and falling into passivity, I think it's just allowing things to happen around you, but not stepping into the action where the Lord's leading you. So I think I found myself in that moment, and when I catch myself more, I'm like, I'm missing the waves. I'm missing the waves and the purpose of why God still has me on this earth. Like if I fall into this place of, I'm okay, just living day to day, I'm missing what God has for me, and in what He's asked me to step into and to participate in. Else, then I'm not being used, and that's where it's fun. So I think a little story to go with that question.
And I look at the words of waiting and passivity, and both people are sitting on one spot. They're not moving, okay? But why aren't they moving? And the person who's passive, just the definition of passive, you're not doing anything. You're just sitting there, right? Because the person who's waiting, I look at it just saying, by waiting, I'm waiting for guidance from God. I'm waiting for word. That doesn't mean I'm not moving. I'm praying, I'm researching, I'm studying. It's like when you have a kid that needs a job. You can wait for that job, or you can be passive about that job. But waiting means you're reading, you're looking, you're studying. You're not just sitting there doing nothing. And that's my, semantically, when I say passivity, being passive, and waiting. I am waiting patiently on the Lord. I'm not waiting passively for the Lord.
Good.
It's really good. There's a sense of action that still is
I'm not moving.
in play in the waiting.
Yes.
I think I also have always just enjoyed the idea that, like, in the Psalms, He's like a lamp unto our feet, which means it's just enough light for me to take one more step. And so just that patience that we exercise and that waiting is active. It's being in community. It's bringing other people in so that they're praying alongside you. It's seeking wisdom. There's a ton of things that are happening. Whereas I think when I'm passive, I just sit on my hands and I just hope it happens. And I squeeze my eyes and pretend like somehow this genie is going to produce what it is that I was hoping for. Yeah. All right. Okay, so this is interesting. Should we share the gospel with everyone we meet, or wait until we're asked about the hope we have? I'm going to caveat this because this is actually a callback to the last time in February when we did a Q&R. We were talking about evangelizing, and what I had said was, it's interesting that the main verse about apologetics, Peter says to have an answer when asked. To have an answer when asked. And I go, so I don't know that means that I should be at the pier with a sandwich board, like shouting at people about the gospel. And then literally we were, just in Romans 10, when Paul is talking about evangelism, he's talking about timing. He's talking about like knowing the person that's in front of you. And I was recently having this conversation with a young man who was just on fire, and I go, here's the thing, we were made to be gardeners. But do you want to know what makes someone a good gardener? It's not a magical green thumb. It's that they know the plant in front of them. They know if it's a drought-tolerant plant, so don't give it a lot of water. If it's just a swamp plant and it needs to be swimming, is it full sun or is it parched? Like, they know the plant in front of them. And I go, so if I come in, guns blazing, all the water and all the sun, I may murder that plant, and it never has an opportunity to thrive. And so this is likely a question directed to me, but I'm really interested in your thoughts on it, because what I had said is I don't want to go in with an agenda I want to live the gospel out in a way that demands that Joe goes, Dan, what is it about you?
I want you.
Right.
What is it about you? So I'm just interested in your thoughts on that, like the difference between the Great Commission that calls us to go and share versus this thought of like, always be closing coffee or
For sure. Yeah, so it is tough, and I think part of it, again, this is another question would be like very helpful to understand, and it's really contextual whether this is a lifelong friend who you're talking about or it's somebody who you've sat next to on an airplane in passing, and just kind of reading the situation and what questions they're asking, right? Because I think how you're interacting with that individual in the moment or the experience they're having with their life may dictate how you approach them, right? And I think the other key to this is redefining what evangelism is. You know, evangelism is not necessarily I have to have this person pray the prayer and then I've succeeded, right? Evangelism is, hey, we're working with this individual, right? If they know us, they know we're Christian, and we can help them out a little bit, right? Or we can maybe answer one question for them. You know, if you look at it on a scale of like 0 to 10, right? 10 being they become a conversion to Christ, right? If we meet them at about a 2 and we can get them to a 3 or a 4, we're doing good. We'll pass them on down. Somebody else will come up in their life. And so I think that takes some of the weight off. Is right. We don't need to convert every single person. But that said, I mean, there is this aspect of like, if you don't tell them, they're never going to know. I mean, I've got a friend in our small group. He puts a Bible tract in every single bill, every single dinner bill he puts, like every single one. And it's like, it's crazy because you go out to dinner with him, you're like, you know, the waiter like sees it and they look at you.
We're doing this. Oh, we're doing
right,
this today.
exactly. But then you're that couple who's like, well, did I have a beer with dinner? Like, what happened? Why would they put, like this whole big thing? But it's like,
What was the tip?
some people are really, really strongly gifted with being overt evangelists, right? I have a friend who's very talented. He'll go up to anybody and just get right into it. But for me personally, what works, I think, is developing a friendship and just, trying to, be that light, be something that's a little bit different than what they encounter, and work that way.
I think that you alluded to it, but some people will put the seed in, and some people will fertilize that seed, and some people will water that seed and water that seed, and finally that person down there is going to tend the crops and get the fruit off of it. I don't think God says that we do all those
He
things.
says the opposite.
Right. We need to be aware what He wants us to do, and sometimes it's nothing except for being the example, right? Because we're always looking for the opportunity. When you get up in the morning, your whole day, you are looking and saying, God, who are you going to bring in front of me? That's not so I can plant a seed, water it, fertilize it, weed it, and make them a Christian. It's so I can show your love. And if you're saying, just do the good deed, right? Look for the car that's broken down on the side. And you just stop and you fix the lady's tire and you drive off, because He didn't tell me to talk to her, right? He didn't tell me to sit there and pray with her. Yeah. But as I drove off, maybe I have a sticker in my window, or maybe she says to somebody, hey, this guy in this old beat up truck, crazy gray hair, stopped by and fixed my flat, and he just drove off afterwards. I know that guy. He goes to our church. It is a unspoken witness, which I think is okay if you're being led. What you're saying, if he's being led to put a track in every one, or if you're being led to go to the pier and speak, you better do it.
Yeah.
Going on your gardening thing, I had a lemon tree in my backyard in my old house, and I remember one day I decided I wanted a lemon off that tree. And I don't know if you've ever tried to pull a lemon off a tree when it wasn't. I mean, a lot of times you go take a lemon in your tree and it just falls in your hand. And that's kind of like sharing the gospel. Sometimes you just touch it and it just sits in your hand and you're like, I did this. But that's not it. And then this time though, I went to get that lemon and it was like a tug of war. And I was determined. I pulled that lemon off, but I pulled this much of the branch off with it, And it just made me think of like sometimes I am that gardener. Especially in that stage, I think the Lord was showing me with my kids, I was like over-fertilizing, over-watering, sunlight, and it's just going to kill these plants. Just back off. And I think we just have to be led by the Holy Spirit and communion with God. And we just can never get out of the fact there's no formula. We just have to be like, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to do? Just that constant conversation we're having with God. And then a lot of times you're sharing the gospel with someone and it's just right in your hand.
I had that situation. Me and my buddy Clay were doing, for facilitating starting point, and this gal comes in, and like week 2, she's like, I'm in. What do I need to do? What do I say? Do I put my hand in the air? Do I put my hand on the book? What do I do? And we're like, we are crushing it. Are you kidding me? Dude, we like, congrats. Are you? And so, shortly thereafter, diagnosed with cancer, and she passed away. And she was an older gal, but she diagnosed with cancer, passed away, and they asked us if we'll come speak at her memorial service. We're like, absolutely, we'd love to. We go to her memorial service, and before it's our turn to go up and talk, there's 8 different people who go up and talk about how they've been praying for her for decades, how they traveled with her, how they walked through her divorce, how they this, how all of these believers for decades. And Clay and I are looking at each other like,
We're not saying nothing.
rewrite the thing, don't say the thing. Like we didn't, and it was awesome then in that moment to both be humbled, but also to realize that this is a team sport, like that it's a family business. It's a family business that we're invited into, and so it's exciting to just simply, I've oftentimes used the old camping analogy of like leave it better than you found it. All I want to do is make sure that soil is a little more fertilized, or maybe it just needed a little bit of water, and maybe it needed a bunch of water this time, or maybe it needed nothing, maybe it just needed just leave it better than you found it. And the other nice thing about that is it removes all the weight and pressure.
Right.
As though I save anybody.
Right.
It lifts that off.
I was worried about my brother a couple weeks back, and he's going through a bunch of trials. And I was driving out, going to have lunch with him, and I'm going through my head all these things. And God said to me and he's done it several times, but he said, Jim, I love him way more than you do. I'm knocking on his door. I'm speaking to him way more than you are. Just listen to me. And that's what guides your voice. That's what guides what you do.
Yeah.
Because sometimes he's saying, please, please, don't say a word. And we're doing like you just said. I'm trying to pull that lemon off. And they're saying, don't, it's not ready. You're going to make it, you're going to kill it.
All right, here we go. How do you keep caring and loving someone who has a hard heart towards you? At what point do you or can you step away if there seems to be no redemption in the relationship?
There's a lot that plays into this, because your proximity and your relationship with this person really would factor in. But let's assume it's a familial relationship, a marriage, or a mom, a dad, a sister, a brother, where you're constantly going to be around this person again. Because I don't even think you'd have to bring that question up if you could just remove yourself from that person's proximity. You can go, forgive you, you live 6 houses down, and I don't really have to see you except maybe at the mailbox. But this is probably someone that's in their sphere and is constantly 70 times 7, 490 times offending them, and that's when it gets a little bit harder. And I know in my own life, I think that's why Jesus said, pray for your enemies. You start praying for that person, and you start seeing them through the eyes of the Lord. And I just have to constantly put myself in the perspective of the person that offends me. I go to Matthew 18, where it talks about the unforgiving servant. And, the servant who was forgiven for so much, I have to keep reminding myself, that's me. I was forgiven of so much. And though what that person's doing to me feels like it's totally worth me going after their throat, because that's what he does, right? He goes after their throat.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to visualize that's what I'm doing. It's like, am I really doing that in your eyes, Lord? Do you really see me going after that person's throat? But I don't think he gave me that parable for no reason whatsoever. And he's brought that parable to my mind many times when I am around somebody who offended me over and over and over and over again. And I just take heart in the fact that God's not going to leave me in that situation longer than I need to. He's teaching me what he did in that situation. And I had a situation like that. He taught me how graceful he was. He got rid of my self-righteousness. I was frighteningly self-righteous. I didn't even realize I was self-righteous. But because I kept thinking I was better than that person because of what they were doing to me, and I had to keep revisiting the cross and what I was forgiven of, 70 times 7, I grew. So whoever you are, if you're in that situation, you are growing. You are growing in grace every time you are forgiving that person. Hang in there, keep on forgiving, because God will not make you forgive more than his resource of forgiveness is there for you, you know.
Short question, lots of answer to it. Why is there hell? I've actually been thinking about this for a long time.
I don't know that answer.
Yeah, so here's what's interesting. So there's a couple thoughts that I have on this. Number one is, if you were sitting here with me, I would say, well, what do you mean by hell? What do you mean? Do you mean Dante's Inferno? Because that's literature. That's not biblical. That Dante created a story around this. So, like, is that what you're thinking? Are you thinking of scaly, demons with horns that are red and have pitchforks and stab people? Is that what you're thinking? Because that's not, like, that's Dante. So I think first would be the question, what do you mean by hell? I think, so then I'd say, why is there a hell? Because God gives us a choice of whether or not we want to be in relationship with him or not in relationship with him. And at the end of the day, we will either choose to be, or he will honor our choice to not be. So I think it is fair to say, and I would argue with anybody, God doesn't send anyone to hell. He allows them to go exactly where it was, to choose not to be in relationship with him. In The Great Divorce, C.S. Lewis says that the gates of hell are locked from the inside. In the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, interestingly, the only parable where Jesus names somebody. The rich man is in hell, Lazarus is in heaven. The rich man is constantly barking orders. What does he never say? I'm sorry, and I was wrong, and I belong here. He doesn't do the thing that the criminal on the cross does. You are who you said you were, and I'm wrong, and I belong here, and you don't. There's no repentance from him, even in the midst of actually being in hell. This idea that it is a choice that God is honoring. He will honor the choice that you either want to be with him or the choice that you do not. And at the end of life, it is either us that turns to him and says, thy will be done, or it is him that looks at us and says, thy will be done. Mm-hmm. And so I think this, why is there a hell? We've culture, Renaissance, and everything else has created a picture of what hell is that I don't think the Bible supports. And it certainly has created this, and we've been guilty of it, like the big church, the historical church, has been guilty of making that a reality, painting it on churches, and then God's gonna send you to hell. I think we pretty much make that choice for ourselves. And because what's God's heart? 1 Peter, what's God's heart? That everyone would come home and repent. That's his desire, but he's not gonna make you do it. He'll honor the choice. It's a wild thing for God to do, to honor our choices and say, I'll respect you. I made you, but I'll respect you. And if you don't want to be around me, I'm not going to force that. And so...
Yeah, I think that's right on to frame hell as, an eternal separation from God, right? I mean, and you can look around at your friends, right? Friends who aren't believers, right? They haven't made that eternal choice, but they are currently separated from God. So what hell then for them is a continuation of their current life, which is separation from God. And those of us who are in God and who have that connection and have that overflowing life, that's what they're missing. That's what hell is. It's missing that ability to be content and to have that overflowing abundance and relationship with God. So I think that's right on that answer.
Why? I've been so excited about this question. Listen, I've been so excited about this question. And I'm reading it exactly as it was submitted. Why does the Bible teach toxic masculinity? Now, here's the thing. We all smile, and I'm smiling. Someone asked this question honestly.
Yes.
Asked this question honestly. So, I would love it if there wasn't a why, and it says, does the Bible teach toxic masculinity? To me, that's a much fairer question, but the question is, why does it teach toxic masculinity, which creates an assumption that it does.
And it does. My opinion. Is anybody gonna hit
No,
me?
go for it. Let's go. I like it.
Please. Go for it.
This just got interesting. Go.
This is why it's a conversation. This is good.
If you look at our Bible and you look at their culture and the history that it explains, right? So that's not saying it is teaching it.
Yes.
But it is covering. It's like saying we have systematic racism in the United States, right? It's there. It doesn't mean that our Constitution and that we all support it. But in regards to how the Bible talks about it, saying their history in the Old Testament, in the New Testament, there is a toxic masculinity. And this is coming from a man, right? But I say, Jesus, and this is the most important part, he does not teach that. His example to us, when he comes to that Samaritan woman at the well, and his disciples even looked at him and they were astounded that he's talking not just to a Samaritan, which is almost as low as you can be. It'd be like, I don't know what's low in our current culture, but compounded by that, it's a woman. And he just erased that 100%. So, do we have examples of toxic masculinity in the Bible? Yes. Does it say that's what we should be doing? No. My opinion.
I think this is one of those things where I said, does the Bible describe it? Yes. Does the Bible prescribe it? No. In fact, the opposite. Yeah, go. You were about to jump in.
Well, I was just going to say, this question goes back to what you said about why is the Bible an authentic book?
Yeah.
It doesn't have cancel culture. They're like, we're not going to cancel all this stuff that these people did that was wrong. We're not going to cancel what Lot did that we don't even want to teach our kids till they're like much older. You know what I mean? It's just like, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. I don't even want to go there. You know, there's things in the Bible that are like, wow, they give you pause. And that's how you know it's a real and legitimate book.
Amen.
You know, and there's things in there. And yet, there's God's grace from beginning to end and how he took these flawed people and he worked in the midst of them. And you know, the Bible is so much kinder to women than culture ever was. I mean, in the Magna Carta in 1215, they said that document was revolutionary because it gave property rights to women. And I'm like, oh no, that's not the first time. It was back there in Deuteronomy. The daughters of, I forget his name, but they said, hey, our dad only had all girls and we need land inheritance in the promised land. And I'm like, you know what, you're right.
And the fact that
You
they
can-
were heard.
Yes, you know what, not only can you come to me, I'm going to give you property rights. You know, the woman, the Proverbs 31 woman, went out and saw a field and she bought it. She purchased real estate. So, you know, the Jewish culture isn't anti-woman. The Old Testament even, you go back so far. So does the Bible preach toxic masculinity? It's got some toxic men in it. You know, and as a
And
woman...
some toxic women.
All right, there's some really bad. We're all in there. We're all in there, warts and all. All of our sins are in there, but that's the grace, right?
Yes.
Jesus
Yes.
is the only shining star.
Why you love our
You
Bible.
know, and so
Well, and you legitimately, you have Deborah.
yeah,
You have all of these. So yeah, I just think that it's interesting because in every other faith system that I have looked at, read, lived in, worked through, following Jesus is the only one that elevates women to a position of number one, like equality in value and intrinsic value, made in the image of God. And then two, calls a husband to be prepared to lay down his life for her. Not to go get more of them, not to keep them 5 paces behind you, not to give them extra steps on the Eightfold Path in Buddhism, not to, like, all of these other worldviews that I see. It doesn't take long for you to see that they are not of equal value and equal worth to God, let alone the other adherents are called to see them in that same light and treat them in value. But like what the Bible describes is toxic humanity.
Amen.
Amen. Yes.
What the Bible prescribes is a new heart, a new human, a new creation, one that seeks to return to garden DNA and garden life, where image bearers reflected God and refined one another. And like I read this and I get it. You know, if you want to, you can absolutely pick and choose, but you're missing the idea that like they're describing things, they're not prescribing things. And the other thing I'd say is keep reading. When you see toxic masculinity, keep reading and see how well it worked out for that person.
Amen.
Like,
Right? Yeah.
well, Solomon had multiple wives. Yeah, see
Yeah.
how well that worked out for
Right.
him.
Right.
Well, Abraham slept with her too. Yeah, and
Yeah.
now we have a
still
lot of
alive.
problems in
And
the Middle East. Like it's
Nabal was a jerk to Abigail. How'd that work out for him? You know what I mean? It's just, you just got cause and effect right in there.
It's-
God's not pleased.
just keep reading. Keep reading.
And
like,
so I think to go back to the question, why does the Bible teach it? Because it's real life.
Amen.
Like life is messy, and the Bible does teach those stories, because if it was all perfect, we wouldn't be able to relate.
it's like a cautionary tale.
100%.
Yeah.
It's teaching us history.
Yeah.
Don't do it.
Absolutely.
Okay. How should I talk to a friend who is thinking about abortion? You and I talked a little bit about this previously.
Yes.
And you're like, I'm just on fire for this one.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I know what that feels like because I had an abortion. So I know what I needed to hear in that time. So I find myself 18. I find myself pregnant. I know I've already picked up my mom from the abortion clinic for her own abortion. So I know where my parents are coming from. When I got old enough to drive, she's like, hey, can you pick me up? She wasn't pleased she was doing it, but that's where she was at. I had heard my dad talk to my older sister about, you need to abort that person, she's married and she's pregnant. So I didn't even go to my parents. I needed someone, what I needed was hope. And I'm going to tell you the number one thing that makes someone get an abortion is fear. I don't know if, and as I've come over the years, because I've talked to a lot of people who are considering abortion, and I've had the joy of being able to see them turn around and lives being born. And I guess I can say out of my own, and I share it with them openly, this is not a decision that was a good decision. What I wished I had known was there was hope, and that God would be with me, and that I didn't have to follow through with that. And I think who's ever in that situation, the fears that I have found out, fear is the number one reason people have an abortion. Fear they're not going to have enough finances. Fear that they're going to have to stay with maybe somebody who's an abuser. Or fear that their affair is going to get found out. There's all kinds of things that play into that of like why people are afraid. And I think you're addressing their fears and knowing that you want to share with them that God is bigger than that situation. And he will be there with you through it. God is the giver of life. He says, I make alive and I kill. And if God has entrusted and gifted that person with life, help them to see life. Help them to see hope instead of death and fear and hiding. That's a dark place to be in.
We had a series on kind of radical redemption, big redemption, and we talked about taking life and in all of its manifestations. We talked about abortion, and in follow-up to that, I reached out to the Pregnancy Resource Center and I talked to the executive director there, and she said the same thing. She said the two things that you just want to is hope and possibility, and possibility, and that fear is the fear of all these unknowns that I don't know what's going to happen if. And she's like, man, if you can just share hope and possibility, and get them to someone who can help unpack those fears with them, because it may not be you. And she herself shared her story of how she had an abortion when she was young, and now she's the director of the Pregnancy Resource Center. And she's like, it is my privilege to sit with young men and women who are struggling with this, husbands and wives who are struggling with this, and just communicate hope and possibility, and then lay out the facts, and then let them realize this is life.
Mhm.
This is life.
It's life.
And she goes, and when they make a choice that breaks my heart, I tell them how much I love them and how we're going to be here anytime they need us. And it was just, which is another communication of hope. Like you're still loved you're still loved.
And I think for them to realize that life is a gift. God's entrusted them with a gift. You know, that's even hopeful, even of the fact that they're pregnant. That people can't even, people have such a hard time getting pregnant these days. So yeah, I know their fears are big. We just need to, fear is such a monster, isn't it?
Okay, how about this one? How can I be a good example of Christ to my family who are not believers, but understand my values without being too preachy?
I think you don't always have to use words. I think my family knows me better than others. I actually talked to my mom yesterday. We were on this hot topic, and I had probably 5 minutes to talk, and I was like, "This is how I feel about it." And then I was like, "Oh my goodness, what did I offend my mom?" And I think I just had such a quick second to realize I may have offended my mom and what I said. And I called her back, and she didn't answer her phone. And I was like, "What happens if I can't tell my mom then?" She called back. She's like, "Well, we just talked. What happened?" And I said, "I just want to be sure that I didn't offend you in what I said." I said, because how I treat you is more important than any other thing about my perspective on something or my opinion on something. And so it's being an example of Christ is loving people really, really well. And I think through that, and your family knows you best. Most families know you best. There's some detached families. But they know to ask questions. Hey, something's different about you, whether it's you're sad or you're happy. And so when God is working in your life, that causes those who love you and who you love to step into conversation.
Yeah. I would also say like prayer, kind of the secret weapon. I think you can be in prayer for your family constantly. I have a brother, so my middle brother, I'm the youngest of three, and you know, he's going through a hard time with him and his wife, or like in his family generally, that kind of situation. And I'm like, hey, I'll be praying for you. And he's not a believer in me. Oh, don't even say that. Don't you be praying for me. And I'm like, I don't care what you say. Like, you can't stop me. Exactly. Like, try and stop me, you know. Like, but he was so offended, you know, like, no, don't even say that. Why would you even say that to me, you know? But yeah, I don't know. So I think prayer can be a helpful, you know, aspect of it as well.
And prayer is also, I'm with you. I'm the youngest of three. And I told you my next brother up is alcoholics, going down that road. They both had multiple wives with multiple children. But when you say pray for them, my prayer often is send someone else to talk to them.
Yeah.
Because they're going to do exactly what you just said. Right. I'm not listening to you. You're my younger brother.
Right.
Or, you know, you're my son. Why would I listen to you? And my prayer is constantly, Lord, just bring someone into their life that can talk to them. I don't have to be the guy like we were talking before that pulls the lemon off the tree, right? I just need to reflect. And like you said, when I screw up, and I'll screw up in front of them, they know it. Hey, I am sorry. I'm human, right? I'm a hypocrite sometimes. I apologize. But just pray that they come. And like I said before, God says, I love them way more than you do, Jim.
Yeah, I think my goal with none of the rest of my family are believers. And I think my goal, what I've learned over time is that my goal is that I would just constantly be a safe and sane person in their life. So that if the day ever comes that they find themselves like so far that they've landed on their knees and they've got questions, if it's not someone else that they go, Dan is safe and sane. He's never been weird. He's never been like pushy about his. I've been weird lots. That's true. I've been different kind of weird. Lots of times. But you know what I mean? Like this like. That's my goal, and that's my goal with my brothers. Is not that I'm going to win them to Christ, because I think that's probably the hardest. I mean, Jesus is like, can't be a prophet in your own hometown. Like, tough crowd. Is this thing on? Kind of a thing. Like I recognize that, and so if I can just let my actions speak louder than my words, then maybe when the day comes, if they do want to ask a question, they'll be like, you know, Dan's always been safe and sane, and I can, you know, and I know where he came from and who he was. And I can see the differences. Yeah.
And it's an amazing blessing when that happens.
Yeah.
When that friend or that brother, sister just calls you and say, hey, I'm going through this huge thing. Can you pray? You know, sometimes they'll even throw that little quip in, well, you're closer to God, right? Or something like that. But hey, at least they're acknowledging that they need God. They need a prayer.
Amen.
It's that step. So, thank you.
Let's see. Okay. Last question for today. Last question. How do you trust God with your dream job or trust Him with your calling?
It's too easy. That's why I'm not saying anything. It's I had a dream job. I have a dream calling. I have a dream retirement. I'll go steps backwards, right? I became a fireman at 20 years old. Dream job. We would sit on my fireboat out in the ocean, on a fireboat, 200-foot fireboats with all the tankers and cruise ships and container ships all around us, and we would say, what would be a better job that a person that isn't a sports star, can't sing a lick or something, what happened? We'd say, this is a great job for us. Your job is great, your job is great, all of your jobs are great, right? And then I retired, and God gave me a dream mission, right? I had a friend that retired, and he says, Jim, working for God is the best thing ever. How many countries have you traveled to? You go to places that no one imagines. You're introducing them to God. They are just falling over left and right. You know, sometimes you get the Montezuma's revenge, or we get kicked out of Mexico. You might spend a day, you know, not in prison, but... And then you look at it, and I say, in Numbers, I think, it talks about retirement. I think it's the only place in the whole Bible that talks about retirement, right?
They got it in there early so that you get compounding interest.
Absolutely. And he actually says retire at 50. So, I mean, it's coming up close for some people. I'm way past that. But he says when you retire, you've got another job. And that's exactly what I got. And so this person's question, it's like, God, just say, and I say to my guys at my work, I still go back to the fire station, talk to them. And I said, all you got to do is take that step. That's it. For the job, for the mission, for the retirement, for your wife, for, you know, everything is, we go back to the basic line on every one of those questions. Let's pray. God, what do you want? Give me the wisdom, give me the guidance. Hold my hand.
See, I think you may be tapping into the question though, which is, you know, but this is my dream job and the calling that I want.
Absolutely. It's all different.
And it's not coming to fruition. You know what I mean? The job that look, let's be honest. I thought I was still going to be a Marine right now. I was on a massively fast track of promotion, and I was confident that I was going to be a sergeant major and continue on up the food chain, and then it was gone. Gone. I you know, like all of these things that I thought were going to be were gone because it was mine.
Your dream.
That I was holding on to like
Your
this.
dream.
And so I think, you know, that's, how do I trust him with it? You gotta learn to trust him. You gotta learn to trust him.
Amen.
And you gotta stop thinking that this is all about me, you know, and you've got to learn to find the joy in the job that you have today. Because I've done some terrible jobs. So like, the Marine Corps is not awesome every day. The fire department's not awesome every day. It was not a dream. It's not every day.
It's not a dream job. It is not a dream. Guarantee you.
But if I can find the joy in the midst of it, it becomes a dream job because of the community I have there and the opportunity that exists there to and so I think some of that exists in this question too, is like maybe it's time to redefine what a dream job is, and maybe it's time to, you know, when I think about a calling, is demystify it. What am I called to do? To love those around me, to one another, to be a great neighbor to the person across the street. That's your calling, you know.
We had a conversation a couple times with someone who attends 1010, And it was like, oh, I get to surf at 10 o'clock, Monday through Friday. And I was like, live it up.
Dream job.
Because this will not always be this way. I said, this is a season. And so enjoy the season that you have. And I said, I had that season. I would paddle out at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and surf, and it was totally okay. And I said, but those days are gone. But I enjoyed them where they were. And so I think it's redefining what your dream is and aligning it with where God has placed you. Because I had the dream job, and I would say I have a dream job now. The fact that I get to hear little laughter, I hear little puppy noises coming from kindergartners, and just seeing the joy on their face. But I wasn't there 10 years ago, and so I was working with ministries all over the world, and being able to give, and it was a joy. It was a joy to have time to paddle out at 2 o'clock and surf. But now it's a joy to serve the Lord, and with a busy work schedule right now, it is fun. It is really fun. And then trusting God with your calling. I think everyone's like, what is God's will for my life? And that is the biggest question. It's love Him.
Amen.
Love Him and fix your eyes on Him. And then things flow through that. And life won't always look like you imagined it would, but it'll be different and better as your heart begins to change.
Did anybody think their life would be like it is? I mean, no. I mean, we just can't. I feel like we write down all these ideas and we push our kids to write down all these ideas, and God just rips them up and throws them in the air and says, now for my will. You just trust. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just trust one day at a time and watch what He has. His ways are better.
Keep our eyes focused on Him.
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you think, Joe?
I mean, what's the alternative? Not trusting? Like, who else are you going to trust? I don't know. So.
All right, so last thought on this, it was really interesting. I was talking about it today, and one of my buddies was saying, he's like, I don't know what it is. He's like, but more and more, I'm growing to dislike the concept of I just want to be used by God. I just want to be used by God. He goes, I'll tell you what, it would break my heart if one of my kids said, I just want to be used by Dad. Because that would break my heart. He's like, I would want one of my kids to come up to me and say, hey, Dad, what can I do alongside you? Hey, Dad, what are you working on today? Can I help? Hey, Dad, can I get in on the family business and maybe I can add to it? Like, hey, Dad, he's like, if one of my kids said, hey, Dad, how can you use me today? I would be so sad. He's like, I'd be so sad that they think that I think of them that way. And he goes, I just feel more and more like I've got to start rethinking that. And he goes, it's not because it's bad. I know what everybody means when they say it. He goes, but maybe when we came to Christ, God came and put an out of business sign on our old life. And He said, come join the family business because I want you to partner with it. It's God and kids. Like, I want you to be a part of this. And we're going to, it's an international work. We're going to go for it, And so I just think that's a really exciting opportunity. I said that my dream job was being a Marine, and I tell people this all the time. 12 years I was a Marine. 5 more years I was a contractor. The last almost 12 years of my life of being a believer, there is no greater adventure that my 17 years behind me had than what it is that these 12 years have had, simply by being obedient and just saying yes. So, well, thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. Everybody, this was long, but thanks for watching. So June, the first Wednesday in June is going to be the next question and response night, except that one isn't going to be a free-for-all. It's not an Ask Me Anything. We'll have just finished throughout the month of May a series on relationships. And so for that question and response, we're going to have couples in, and we're going to be specifically asking questions about love, sex, and relationships and how those things play out. People who have been in the thick of it, who have messed it up and put it back together, or who have really endured through hard seasons. So we hope that we will see you there. Thanks, 1010.